of time and space. Everywhere and anywhere, every star that ever was. Where do you want to start?
The Daleks are throwing a bizarre dinner party on Kemble. But more of that soon. Let's follow the Doctor to Troy, in ancient Turkey, and discuss the mythmakers, often held to be an ancient Turkey. I'm Iain.
And I'm Mark. And welcome to All of Time and Space. And this time round, we're going to be taking a look at the mythmakers. So this is where we've got up to in the story. Long, long ago, on the Great Plains of Asia Minor, two mighty armies faced each other in mortal combat. The armies were the Greeks and the Trojans, and the prize they were fighting for was Helen, the most beautiful woman in the world. Probably. To the Greeks, it seemed that the city of Troy was impregnable and only a miracle could bring them success. And then help comes to them in a most unexpected way as a strange blue box materialises close to their camp, bringing with it the First Doctor, Stephen and Vicky, who soon find themselves caught up in the irreversible tide of history and legend. First Doctor? Anyway, we'll be back with our guest after this.
Well, what is this idea of yours?
Yes, it's all perfectly simple.
Nonsense! Show them the plans, Doctor.
Quite revolutionary.
Yeah, what do you make of that?
Well, it's a horse. Isn't it?
Well done, nevertheless. But what sort of horse? That's the point.
Well, a big horse.
Exactly, a very big horse.
Is it some sort of...
A horse that's at least 40 feet high.
Oh, but horses don't grow as big as that. Do they? I mean, even the great horse of Asia that the Trojans worship.
Now you're beginning to get the point. Horses don't grow that high.
No.
The great horse of Asia does not exist. Therefore, we are going to build one for the Trojans as a sort of present.
Go on. We build it of wood and we build it hollow. Then we fill it with a picked team of soldiers. Well, then what do we do? You take to the ships and sail away. Make the Trojans think you've all gone. Excellent. Now, that is a good idea. You all come back again, of course. Why is there always a catch in it? None of this must happen before nightfall.
Now Achilles will take his myrmidons and hide out upon the plain. I thought you said the best warriors would be in the horse. So they will be. I shall be there with my Ithacans.
Eh?
My Ithacans and the Doctor, of course.
That wasn't part of the plan.
It is now. I've just thought of it. I'm standing no more nonsense from you, Doctor.
That will not be necessary. I shall only get in the way.
You'd better not do that. Now the rest is up to the Trojans. They see that we have gone. They see their great horse upon the plain, which has descended from heaven to drive us away.
Then they drag the horse into the city.
Are you sure? Suppose they set fire to it.
Oh, well, that is a calculated risk, but somehow I don't believe they'll want to destroy one of their own gods. Yes, but once they have the horse inside, won't they close the gate?
Of course they will. But during the night, we shall leave the horse, open up the gates to let you all in again. What more do you want?
A drink.
And welcome back. And I'm really pleased to say we've been joined by podcasting royalty. It's Phil Cannon from the Who's He podcast. Hello, Phil.
Hello, Mark. Hello, Ian. Thank you for having me. And royalty.
Oh, it's our pleasure.
I don't know about that. I'm probably sort of like one of the sort of the lower levels of royalty, like Princess Michael of Kent or something like that.
Or should I say podcasting legend? Because you guys have been around for a while now.
Podcasting legends. I'll go for that. I think.
Yeah.
That's almost what we've got written down here.
Now, of course, this will mean nothing by the time this episode actually goes out because of our release schedule, but you guys have just recently celebrated a big anniversary at Who's He.
Yes, we have. We've just sort of celebrated our 10th anniversary of podcasting. So Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Yeah, depending when this goes out, got a little golf clap. Thank you very much. Depending when this goes out, that was on the 18th of March this year.
Yeah.
So it was. And I never thought we'd get there, to be honest. I thought we'd sort of pack it up after a couple of years, if I'm honest with you. But here we are, still churning out the same old rubbish month after month.
Well, I listen every time, so, you know, at least you got one listener.
Oh, that's the one. Oh, you're him, are you? Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
I wondered who it was.
Leave him a bloody review, Mark. That's all he wants.
I have already, you cheeky so-and-so. I'm very good like that. If I like a podcast, I always leave a review.
Thank you very much.
Incidentally, if you're listening to this podcast and you've been enjoying it, please leave us a review because that really helps us out. Okay, that's the end of the sales spiel.
There's a
bag of chips in it for you.
Yeah, and a free kitten.
And a free what? Sorry, a kit.
A free kitten.
Oh, kitten. All right, there's a free kit.
Yeah,
What, football
yeah.
kit, rugby kit?
Yeah, we'll give them a Millwall kit. Oh, no. We actually want them to
you
leave
want
a review.
reviews,
No,
don't you?
okay, yeah. We want good reviews, please, if we can. Okay, I don't think we can really put this off any longer. Ian, it's time.
It is time. Mark, can you just give me a quick update on the state of the time lash?
Yeah, it's still not working quite properly.
You've dried out the tinsel, right?
The tinsel's fine,
Right.
but Rob Irwin still hasn't come out of the time lash, so slightly worried he might have gone missing forever. I did notice, though, that the cartridge in the 8-track had been swapped out.
Okay.
And somebody had left Kick by In Excess in there.
Oh.
That Australian band.
Yeah. That seems to fit. All right then. Well, as I seem to keep reminding you, please get it fixed for next time.
Okay. Well, you know, with a bit of luck, it might be fixed by the end of the series.
Well, let us hope so. In the meantime, Phil, with no further ado, it is time for you to face what's left of the Mind Probe.
No, not the Mind Probe.
Getting to know
Who?
Getting to know all about
Who?
Ah,
Perfect.
that's pure Jericho, that is.
Right. Just some simple questions, Phil, just to let the listeners get to know you. If they haven't listened to you for the last 10 years, and, you know, if they haven't, then they're dead to me. But for anyone who doesn't know you and your kind of, where you're coming from, what would you say was your favourite era of Doctor Who?
Oh, anyone who knows me, I always say the Pertwee era. Always. Reason being, because it's my very first memory of Doctor Who. It's the Green Death when I was about 3 years old. That's my first television memory, full stop, is the Green Death. So, and it's stuck with me ever since.
Wow.
Wonderful.
Obviously left an impression on you.
It did. It certainly did. But then he was gone. He was gone in a flash. After it seems to have I've got a bit of a memory gap between the Green Death and then the end of Planet of the Spiders. In between that, it's a bit of a blur. For some reason, the whole point of my life has gone. Maybe I'm Captain Jack. Who knows?
Or maybe you were doing a space and you just skipped to the end.
I could have done. I probably just did that, to be honest with you.
Could be that. What would you say would be your favourite classic and your favourite New Who story?
Ooh, favourite classic one. I always come back to Inferno for that one, actually, up at Pertwee, naturally. But I just love that one because I think it's just so different, actually. I know the Primals are just chucked in just to, give the kids something to be scared by. They're not needed. It's entirely superfluous to the plot, but I think it's a cracking story. The whole parallel Earth thing, or parallel universe, I think it's a really good concept. Yeah. I think it's done really well. So that's always my go-to one. New Who, it's a bit of a slight story, but I always go for Utopia. Because I just think
nice.
Yeah, I think it's just a cracking, heart-pounding piece of television. The whole thing just to build up for the reveal of the Master, and I think it's so well done, and it's just so, as I say, it's just so heart-poundingly exciting when you get to that point. I absolutely adore that episode. I really do. It's great. And we didn't get enough Jacoby, though. That's the only thing I can say I didn't like. He should have lasted longer.
Still, there's always Big Finish, so that's something.
That is true. But I'm so far behind on Big Finish as well, to be honest. So,
Oh, tell me about it.
good God. I mean, that is some serious output. But, I've barely sort of scratched the surface when it comes to Big Finish. Seriously. But...
I did enjoy Stranded 1. I listened to that the other day. That's really good. Which is Paul McGann and the TARDIS has gone kaput and he's stuck in present-day Earth. And that's quite an interesting spin on the whole thing. So it plays out over 4 stories. It's just won an award. I think it's the Audie Award. So, yeah, that's quite good. It's something a bit different from the sort of thing you could do on TV, so it shows what Big Finish can do that's you wouldn't be able to do on normal telly.
No,
yeah, it's worth a look.
I don't think now they could get away with doing a whole series without the TARDIS, really. I think that, being stuck on Earth... I know most of the stories are usually Earthbound anyway, but, it's just the fact you take the TARDIS out of it. Do you know what? I think the fans would take to Twitter in their droves, as usual.
They never seem to leave, do they?
No, they don't, unfortunately.
They don't. My God. Okay, question 3. What's your favourite Mark Gatiss story?
Ooh. I think it would be the first one he did, actually, Unquiet Dead.
Great choice.
Yeah, I think that's another one, and one of the best sort of the cold open ever, actually, with the old lady just walking towards the screen. It's fantastic. I mean, they talk about that's what you want for scaring the children. That will send them behind the sofa. Yeah,
that was the first, I think, really iconic moment of New Who, where you suddenly felt, oh yeah, this is my show. This is the scary show. That's a terrifying image. One last question for you, Phil. I want you to imagine that you're allowed to have a go in our TARDIS. And you can travel back anywhere in time, and you can go back to the Doctor Who production office, and you can change one thing, anything behind the scenes in Doctor Who. What would you change? It could be casting, it could be stopping a hiatus, it could be changing the producer, anything like that, dropping a story, anything like that.
Right. I haven't thought about it for 30 seconds. I would say I would change Colin Baker's costume just to give the guy a break, because he always wanted that sort of the sort of, I think it was, he had in his mind like a black costume or like a leather coat, so a bit like Eccleston. He always wanted Eccleston's outfit, I think, when you saw Eccleston. So I'd go back and change that, because that is an absolute monstrosity. And my 8-year-old son still asks me, why, Daddy, did they put him in that costume?
I wonder if that change alone would render that era slightly more easy to watch now.
I don't think so.
No,
I don't know.
the stories small margin.
The stories were still pretty poor, but at least, I mean, Colin Baker would have been happier making it. Perhaps, I don't know, but that's what I would change. I would give him the costume that he always coveted. There we are.
That's a lovely gesture, and that's a great answer, and it is my pleasure to tell you that you have passed the mind probe.
Oh, thank God for that. Thank God for that. I would say thank God the time lash is broken as well.
Don't worry, we'll get it sorted. I didn't
fancy a Tinsley death, actually.
Well, I mean, we can still arrange it for you. It's fine.
Oh, no, I didn't. No, you're quite okay. You're quite okay.
This is podcasting 101. Always threaten your guests with death. That's a surefire way of getting them to agree to come back.
Always keeps them on the edge.
Yeah. Well, now that we've established that air of latent menace, Mark, do you want to kick us off with the Myth Makers?
Yes, the Myth Makers. So this is the beginning of a new era. If I had to think of a phrase to really sum up the behind-the-scenes stuff that's going on as we go into the story, it's all change. So Verity Lambert is gone, and she is now being replaced by John Wiles. We have got Vicky making her last appearance, which I'm absolutely gutted about, but we'll get into that later. We have another new writer. We've got Donald Cotton coming on for his debut story. It's a story that I think follows in the tradition of the Romans, in as much as you've got the historic setting, but they inject a lot of comedy into it. So in my mind, that makes it a bit more palatable to watch than some of the very early historicals. Phil, I feel bad because we kind of made you sit down and watch a recon, and you don't really do recons.
No.
Before we get into the actual story itself, do you want to just talk us through the experience of watching a recon for you?
Yeah, to be honest, I did try watching many years ago. The loose cannon, because this is the version I watched, and it was the loose cannon sort of recon of this story. So, but a few years ago, I did try watching the Dalek Master Plan on recon as well, and I couldn't really get to grips with it because it's this whole thing of just watching the same stills repeating over and over again to just try and line up with the audio. Sometimes you have a little bit of sort of animation put in for very sort of crude animation, or a little bit of sort of film footage, sort of blurry footage superimposed into the still. I've never really got into it. It's never really sort of appealed to me. So I've always sort of shied away from. So this is the very first one that I've watched in its entirety, and thank God it was just a 4-part episode story, this one.
We are very grateful for you taking time out to actually put yourself through that. Ian, I take it is this your first experience, or had you read the Target novel, or any of that kind of stuff?
If you will allow me the floor, gentlemen. So I was hugely looking forward to the Mythmakers because when I was, I guess, about 10, Tony Robinson of Blackadder fame did a sort of 12-part Jack and Ori version of the story of Odysseus. It was called Odysseus, the Greatest Hero of Them All. And I absolutely loved it. And I got the books and I read it over and over again. And I just thought it was the best. And then I got the novelisation by Donald Cotton. And again, that was really funny and really enjoyable. And I never watched the story, though. So, coming to it this time round, this was the one I've been really looking forward to.
The next question is going to be, did it live up to your expectations or not so much?
It did not. I think there were some quite notable deviations from the novelisation, or rather, obviously, because there was probably 20 years between writing them. He'd really improved the story by the time he wrote the novelisation. So Homer was a character, not Homer Simpson, anyone who's listening and confused at home. Homer, the ancient, I want to say Greek storyteller, fabulist. And it was all written first person. There was a lot of very funny stuff in there. Coming to this version, it was a lot more crude, not in a rude way, just slightly less sophisticated. And again, like Phil, I watched the Loose Cannon recon, so we got kind of 3 backgrounds, the same photos of the actors but superimposed in different backgrounds. Some of the sets looked like it was someone's kitchen, and it all looked a lot kind of smaller and less magnificent than I always hoped it would do. So that and some of the casting didn't really work for me either. So without shooting my bolt too early, my whelm was under.
Oh dear. Well, my own personal experience, this was another one that I had the soundtrack for. I forget who does the narration for it now. Probably Peter Purvis, I would imagine.
Actually, I think it's Stephen Thorne, actually. Omega himself.
Oh, okay. Ah, wow. Okay. Oh, the memory
You
cheats, doesn't
pester me with horses. Sorry, I couldn't resist it.
it? Hey, of Omega's Tat Corner himself.
Hey.
Love it. Yay. Yeah, so I must admit, when I did my sort of mammoth listen through to all the missing stuff, it was one that didn't really grab me so much, I have to say. I was aware of the Siege of Troy and the whole thing with the horse and the rest of it, but I don't remember covering that at school as such, so whether people who were really immersed in it would have gotten a bit more from it, but it sounds like Ian's a bit of a fan of the original text, but it doesn't sound like it's really landed with him either. Another thing with the loose cannon reconstruction, which I watched for this, now we have to be eternally grateful to the person who recorded the audio back in the 60s so that we've got the soundtrack at least. But it has to be said, the sound is a bit wobbly in places, which doesn't help. And particularly when it comes to some of the music parts of the soundtrack, it goes very wobbly, which I suppose it helps to make it unintentionally funny at times. So yeah, I think I enjoyed it probably a bit more this time. Maybe it was just I was in the right sort of headspace for it. So yeah, I think certainly this is probably my more favourable experience with this story. So yeah, I'd heard the audiobook of the Target novelisation. As you say, it's a bit more comedic, and they've put a bit more in there as was their want with the Targets, just to sort of flesh it out a bit. So yeah, that's probably makes it a bit more enjoyable.
Yeah.
Donald Tosh is another newbie. So Donald Tosh was the new story editor that came in. And of course we've got Katerina, who's going to be a new companion. I hope she stays on for a while, because I really like her.
Yeah, she was great.
I'm sure she'll be around for ages.
Yeah,
Well,
she's a grower, that one.
It was very interesting. In the novelisation, I think she was introduced about 2 pages before the end, and it was really perfunctory. But I was quite pleased that in this version, the original version, she at least got a proper episode to appear, maybe in 3 scenes. But it felt so kind of bungled, this kind of changing of the guard and Vicky leaving, and they didn't really set up the new character. She wasn't in the story from the beginning. They just kind of felt like contractually we need to have a woman in the TARDIS at the end of this episode. So you with the dark hair, you'll do. In you go.
Yeah, you'll do.
It just
Maureen
felt...
O'Brien went on holiday during the I don't know can't remember if it's the filming of this or in the lead up to this, and she returned from holiday to be told, well, in fact I don't think she was told, I think she found out that she'd read the script for the next story and realised that was her leaving, and she was like, oh great, thanks.
Well, at least it was better than Dodo. Just didn't even get a goodbye scene. It just she's gone to stay with her aunt and uncle in the country, and that was it.
Yeah.
It was like them getting rid of Poochie in The Simpsons, that particular episode. They just removed him out of the frame, didn't they?
Yeah. With a legal message on the screen saying he will never come back ever again. Oh, nice.
Oh dear. No, I'm sort of kind of with Ian on this. Actually, I didn't. It's they certainly do sort of play on the comedy. It's trying to be another Romans, certainly. But that was written by Dennis Spooner, who was responsible for a lot of classic television, things like Random Hopkirk, and I think he might have been involved in things like Man in a Suitcase as well. So he was used to that. He had that sort of that comedic edge to his writing or his productions all the time.
He did a bit of Avengers as well.
He did, actually, yeah. So he influenced quite a lot of classic British television in the 60s. So obviously they're trying to sort of, I don't know, as we can say, recapture the magic, or again, didn't quite work for me, I'm afraid. And I think it does, as you said, and it comes back to some of the casting, I think, to be honest. I mean, a lot of them I just know from comedy roles anyway, like Max Adrian. Was from Up Pompeii, or the first series of Up Pompeii anyway. And to be honest, I think a lot of the stills that were used in this were from Up Pompeii. They just crudely stuck a beard on his face. So
I don't think there are an awful lot of telesnaps from this era. So that's another hurdle they've got when they come to try and make any kind of workable recon.
Obviously,
so they're really starting out.
Well, I mean, Cassandra, Frances White, or the actress Frances White, I know of originally from a Norman Wisdom film, which I think was A Stitch in Time.
Oh, right.
That was to do with writing for a local newspaper or something. It's one of his later films. And then she was in that very twee sitcom May to December with Anton Rogers.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
She was Miss Flood. She was like the eldest secretary of the law firm. Yeah.
Oh, blimey, I haven't thought of that for ages.
Yeah.
It's a blast from the past.
But the one that got me was Barry Ingham as Paris. I mean, if anyone was utterly miscast, or should I say Barry Ingham and his toupee were cast in this role.
Well, he was in the Daleks movie, wasn't he? If I remember
yes, he was
rightly.
Aladon. Yeah, the leader of the Thals. But he was also in the first Steptoe and Son film as well.
Oh, right. Okay.
Harold goes on the honeymoon with his new bride and takes his father along as well, and Barry Ingham, as you do, and Barry Ingham plays sort of like the holiday rep kind of thing, but he knows Harold's wife from old because she was a stripper. So yeah, if you've ever seen it, but just the way I just refer to him now as Old Oily because that's what Albert Steptoe calls him, sort of old Oily. So, but in that again, he's wearing a fantastic toupee.
I thought it was so bizarre hearing him trying to play Paris. So if essentially he's supposed to be Turkish. And I've never heard such a kind of smarmy comedy RP kind of voice. You know, it's kind of, oh, I say, there's some Greeks over there. Yeah, I shall go and... It just, it was just a complete barrier to getting immersed in the story.
His character's a bit of a plank as well, isn't he? Because he's written as this real sort of wuss who is trying his best to wheedle his way out of getting into sword fights and things.
I think that was great. I think the writing of that was really good. But but my problem is, why does he sound like he's a sort of 1960s used car salesman? If he'd done it, but in some kind of, and I'm not asking for miracles. He doesn't have to do a good sort of cod Turkish accent. But if he could have delivered it, if they could all have delivered it in sort of slightly, I don't want it to sound like hello, but if they could have made some effort, that would have overcome the hurdles. Obviously, I was
pissing your horse.
Yeah. Because all we've got, as you say, is the slightly shonky audio recording and about 12 screenshots that they recycle ad nauseum. Mm-hmm. So it was very hard to get into, to really, immerse yourself in. And that was just one hurdle too many, I think, for me personally.
Yeah, I think sometimes if you've got a recon that's not quite working in terms of what they can do visually, if the story is entertaining enough, it can just kind of pull you along with it.
Yeah.
But I
didn't sort of find it that sort of entertaining, unfortunately. And I like the historical Who's actually. I like the fact that back then they would never do this now. That you now get historicals, but there's always a sci-fi element to it. Still, there's always like an alien incursion. But I like the old ones where they tried to accidentally sort of create history or try to avoid changing history. I like those sort of pure historical stories. As maybe I'd have a different opinion of it if the episodes had actually survived, and you can actually see it's as you say, it's very difficult to immerse yourself watching the same stills being recycled on slightly shonky audio quality. But
I think this could be a bit of a revelation if it ever came back, but we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, maybe. I don't think it'll be the top of my list for returns, to be honest with you.
I did like the some of the episode titles were very amusing. Small Profit, Quick Return.
Yep.
Yeah.
Was a good one. And they vetoed a few others. Apparently, Zeus Ex Machina was going to be another one.
I like that one.
And also, is there a doctor in the horse?
Yeah.
Which would have been quite a good one.
Now,
but,
these would have been fantastic, but again, it would have been such a handbrake turn for the series. Like, Verity Lambert's chair is still warm, and suddenly it's becoming a very sophisticated comedy show. I think that would have been simultaneously brilliant and terrible for the longevity of the show.
I agree, actually, because it's not really. I mean, you look at the opening titles of Doctor Who. They're, especially back then. I don't know what it is about that particular iteration of the titles and the music. It's very, very sinister. I feel. Yeah. And then, so you get that, and you thought, oh, this is going to be spooky, or and then you get this. You get comedy Trojans. And pratfalling Greeks or whatever, it doesn't sit well. It really doesn't.
Yeah, and the main problem I had, I think, was with the kind of the framing of Odysseus as essentially the kind of villain of the piece. He kind of blackmails the Doctor into designing the horse, and then he makes him go with him. And at every step of that journey, he's threatening to kill the Doctor or whatever. And Odysseus is a hero, and he's like Blackadder in Blackadder 2. He's sly and devious and charming, but so I really struggled with this version of him as this kind of, because again there were like two stills of him, and they both looked like he was having a particularly painful bowel movement whenever one of these pictures was used. And I mean, am I wrong?
Maybe he's trying to pass a Trojan horse.
Maybe he was. Yeah. All the fetlocks.
So play to them. They did go the extra mile of actually reproducing the horse prop, which I thought they did a good job of.
Yeah, the horse looked magnificent.
That looked great. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a bit of a triumph for the BBC model unit, especially of the 1960s, because it could be really hit and miss. That was really good. Yeah, loved it.
In all the sequences of Odysseus and the Doctor in the horse, you just see the two of them in what's clearly quite a large, wooden room, like they're in the Noah's Ark or something. So, so suddenly, when you get kind of 12 Greeks backing out, you think, well, where were these guys in the the last half an hour of TV? And
it didn't really sort of lend itself to the story at all, did it? Unfortunately, and I know people sort of rave about loose cannon, and I don't want to sort of diss them, because for a long time, and still are really, that's the only sort of visual sort of clues you'll get to any of these missing episodes. So I can't really sort of knock them for putting them together. It's they did it when when no one else was. So you got to hand it to them on that front. I think
the mileage
it's
varies.
The story. Yeah.
The mileage varies. A lot of it depends on what they've got to work with in the first place.
I mean, if you think back to their version of what's the story? The first one that's missing. It's
Marco Polo.
Marco Polo. I mean, that was just incredible. I'm guessing that was them as well. I hope it was. Otherwise, this is irrelevant. Good. When you've got plenty to work from, they can do an almost as good as just watching it on TV experience. But obviously, with this, they had, shall we say, slightly less to work with. And again, I think they did a fairly brilliant job based on what was, maybe 10, 12 photographs in total. I think they did really well. But it's just it wasn't enough because we're greedy and we want more. If the original production wasn't that great, and every time you get Priam talking to Paris and it looks like they're in someone's kitchen, that's not Loose Cannon's fault, and we are in no way having a go at them or their sterling work.
No, exactly. No, it's I think there's. I mean, coming back to the actual sort of story itself, I think I don't know if you felt the same way. I felt the Doctor was out of character in this one as well, constantly trying to sort of get out of going anywhere. As you say, Odysseus sort of blackmailing him all the time. It didn't seem very sort of First Doctor at all, sort of getting very indignant. I know he's kind of, that's to put it this way, he got indignant all the time, but it seemed to be for the wrong reasons in this particular case. Trying to escape early out of the Trojan horse, or I've given you my idea, so let me go now. It didn't seem very.
It starts off quite well, where he gets mistaken for Zeus, and you think, oh, all right, where's this going to go? But it doesn't. After not that long, he then comes clean, and that gets kind of left to one side.
Yeah, not until the very end, really, is it? When they think, when they see him disappear in the TARDIS, and is he Zeus? Yeah. That was it. That was the only time it was referenced again. But
and that was another point of difference with the book, because in the book it's sustained probably for 3/4 of the novel. He's still ambiguous. Is he Zeus? Is he not? And to throw it away in episode 1, I thought was really bizarre.
Yeah.
He should have that kind of godlike ability over everyone, with Menelaus sitting there. He's the Doctor, he knows what's going to happen. He knows the future. He doesn't have to do thunderbolts. He can just defeat them with science and knowledge. And even if he can't defeat them, he can make himself look like a god to them quite easily. Yeah. Sylvester McCoy would have done that with 2 spoons and a hanky. But you're right. I think there was something slightly off with the not so much the writing as the script editing, in that someone who should have had more of an overview of the series as a whole should have said, this is out of character. Stephen is very grumpy in part 1 for no discernible reason, and again it's all the same thing. It doesn't feel quite as joined up as it perhaps should have been.
No, I could be clutching at straws here, but a possible explanation for some of the grumpiness may well be to do with something that was happening in real life, because William Hartnell had a bereavement while he was working on that programme. His Aunt Bessie, I don't think it's the one that makes the really awful frozen Yorkshire puddings, she passed away, and she was very important to him because I think he had a pretty awful childhood, and she was one of the few sort of rocks in that whole situation, and because of his work commitments he couldn't go to her funeral, so he was absolutely distraught and furious, putting it mildly. So that probably didn't help matters.
I do find that sort of, I just wonder if that's actually right or not, really, because they were quite famous for giving their lead actor holiday in the middle of a story.
Yeah,
I just find it difficult, but they weren't giving time off for a funeral. Actually, I just sort of find that a bit odd. It's
a bit strange,
to be honest. Yeah, very strange.
But I don't know. This is also because obviously John Wiles and he didn't get on as well. So whether there was some sort of strife going on, because
it's a perfect storm.
As we will find out as the stories go on, he's very keen to dispose of William Hartnell. So I don't know whether this is the beginning of it or whether he's already off to a bad start and they're just not hitting it off. But and obviously he's got his health concerns as well, which is is not great.
Actually, do you know what? The one thing I did pick up on during, because obviously you're obviously, because you're really sort of listening to the audio than watching what's on the screen with this, and I did pick up on the fact I don't think there are any Billy fluffs in this at all. Actually, most of the fluffs come from the supporting cast.
There was that wonderful moment where King Priam is trying to say the word oratory and fails, or oratorium, and he stumbles over that word, which was hilarious. And that's the only fluff that I noticed in the whole thing. So
there was another one when the messenger comes in. The messenger, it was his only line, and he fluffs it.
I can't be cutting with that. Wasn't there a bit with, I'm sure it's in this one rather than in the next story, where they're back in the TARDIS and they've just left, and Stephen's lying there in a lot of pain, and Katerina is talking to the Doctor, and she's still referring to him as Lord Zeus and things like that, and he tells her, "You must call me Doctor. I am not a dog, a god."
That's right. I thought he said, I'm not Doc. So again, because of the bad sound recording, that he got away with that. But Yeah, that's extraordinary. Yes, it's time to get rid of that guy. Oh my lordy! But on the whole,
bless.
no, I think Phil's right in that it was a really strong performance from Billy, and I guess perhaps on kind of adrenaline and fury, that's maybe his sweet spot. And so when you had a happier TARDIS team and a happier, behind the scenes, that's when he, his guard was down and he would cock up left, right, and centre. But piss him off and take away his inalienable human rights to go to a funeral, and suddenly he's on it. That's a really interesting thing to consider.
Yeah. What do you think of sort of Maureen O'Brien's performance and also her exit from this as well? Because I felt that was it falls into that. I think it just falls into that same trap of we're going to write out a character and we'll have that character fall in love with a supporting player for no real reason. There's no build up to it. It's just they meet and they're in love and that's it. Exit companion. And I think that this falls foul of that yet again, I'm afraid.
It's basically the same as with Susan. So she meets a sort of average-looking man with incredibly thrusting phallic hair. And they sort of simper around each other for a few weeks, and then that's the basis of an entire future, is it? This is a girl from the far future who is choosing to stay on a very primitive, backward planet with people who are so unsophisticated by her standards. But she's doing it because Troilus had lovely hair.
Yes.
It did feel really rough.
Massive fetlocks.
Yeah. It did feel like it was exactly the same exit that Susan got. And as Mark and I have said many times, watching these through in order, we've really loved Vicky. So to see her getting the same kind of revolving door treatment is very disappointing. Now, I did 30 seconds of research and read some interviews with Maureen O'Brien about why she left, and actually she didn't really enjoy the show. She found it very repetitive and boring work, that she took the job because it brought her to London so she could be with her boyfriend, which is marvellous. But so you can see from her side why as soon as her contract was up she was quite happy to walk away from it. But as a viewer, I feel really disappointed because it's like she's gone because her contract. Extend her contract. Give her another year. She was great.
Yeah, she was really good.
I was like, just set up as a Susan substitute, really, but I think she wasn't. She wasn't that at all, really. I think I like the Vicky character.
I think she's far better served.
Yeah, I liked her from in the Rescue the first time she appeared on screen. I liked the relationship we had with Hartnell straight off the bat, really. So I was disappointed to see her go in such a lazy fashion.
Lazy is the word.
I suppose the one positive we can take from all this is that at least she didn't fall for Paris and then discover that his thrusting hair turned out to be a massive wig.
She could have run away with the wig, couldn't she?
A Trojan wig,
Trojan wig. Yeah. It does feel, this is only, this is like the fourth time we've lost a companion now, but it is starting to feel like something that happens fairly routinely now rather than something that happens out of the blue and unexpectedly, and I think this is now going to kind of colour the rest of my watching. So, Phil, bit of background, you may or may not know, but I've not really bothered with the 60s Who at all. So I'm going through these.
Okay.
And with the exception of two Troughtons and maybe one more Hartnell story, I've not seen any of it. And certainly watching them in order gives me a real context and a real feel for the evolution of the show. And I think going forwards from now, I'm going to start to regard it slightly more, kind of side-eye, kind of, is your contract up, is it? Oh, you've been written into a cupboard for an episode, you're probably doomed,
Yeah, exactly, yeah. But, no, do you know what, I mean, obviously, my only sort of inroads to 60s Who was through my father when I was small, because he used to tell me all about Hartnell and Troughton, and that's the first time I heard the word Chumbly used as well. So that was the only thing I knew about it. But when they started replaying them on UK Gold, as it was then known, my podcasting cohort Paul, I didn't have Sky at that particular time. I think I still lived with my parents then as well, actually, and he used to record them on VHS. You might not know that, kids. VHS cassettes.
Ask your grandparents.
And so he used to keep me sort of supplied, sort of like, there's last week's omnibus edition,
Nice.
and he sort of just keep sending me over VHS cassettes to watch. So that's how I got into watching all these old Who's. But they would, if I remember rightly, they'd even show just like single episodes. If the rest of the story was missing, they would just show that what was left of that story.
They had,
which they'd never. I mean, I don't think any TV company would do that now. Certainly wouldn't. And UK Gold now, that's just the Only Fools and Horses channel. That's all there is now. So.
Oh God!
UK Gold was it was the golden age of television. That's what it's. I'm going off topic here. That's meant to be the golden age of television. Now it stands for Go On Laugh Daily. I mean, they must have been up all bloody night thinking of that one. Christ!
I could think of a better one than that. Good Lord! I suppose when they launched, though, they had a kind of very much, we need to fill, 24 hours or whatever it was of broadcasting time. We'll just shove on any old shit. Just give us that missing episode of that story. We've got to fill 4 hours. I remember watching.
Yeah.
I think the first one I tried to watch on UK Gold was. It was supposed to be. It was supposed to be a Tom Baker, and I'd made a special point of getting up early on a Sunday to watch UK Gold, even though I was a student at the time. And it was.
It's a lot of willpower.
It was the first weekend of August 1997, and so I turned it on and they started showing Planet of the Spiders with a huge banner across the screen saying, "Major news story, please turn to a news channel." So I was really miffed that I missed this Tom Baker story because of Princess Diana. I've moved on, I've let it go.
I was going to say, have you got over it?
Yeah, it's fine. I have since seen that story and it was quite good. But yeah, I remember I used to read the magazine back in sort of 1991, and I remember asking my dad, can we get Sky TV? And he just sort of said, "Don't be ridiculous." And that was the end of it for me.
Similar discussion with my father as well. Yeah.
So you felt like you were missing out on something really massive, even though it was just some repeats of an old kids' TV show.
Yeah.
But at the time, I felt it, really painfully that it was happening, and I wasn't part of it, and that's why I suppose to this day I've kind of. And until BritBox came along, I'd never really gone back much beyond 1980, 81. That was when I started with the show. So that was kind of that was where I was interested in then onwards. And it's only in the last kind of 2 years that I've expanded my horizons.
Yes. I mean, obviously, I think for me, when they started releasing all these stories on DVD, that was my, to really get into them, because obviously, on UK Gold you just get the stories broken up with the many adverts. That's the downside of commercial television. But obviously, when you get them on DVD or now Blu-ray, you can watch them as they were broadcast, unbroken. The only thing is you can binge watch them, and you just sort of think, well, looking back on some of that very, very long recaps of the previous week, and obviously it wasn't the same footage. They'd actually refilmed it again as part of that episode. I think the most obvious one is the end of I think it's the first episode of the censor rights. And the way the episode, the cliffhanger, when he's just sort of floating outside the window, and it's extremely creepy, and the lighting as well makes it very, very peculiar. When it comes to the recap, he's just basically got his face pressed up against the glass, and that's it. There's no pretense of floating in space anymore. It's just, it's such a disappointment. But I suppose when you watch it as it was supposed to have been watched in weekly episodes, you have to wait a whole week before you could see the next episode. You've forgotten that it was the Sensrot was floating. In space, and the lighting was different. It looked creepier. That it's just now you could just binge watch it, and you sort of start unfairly, I think, sort of picking holes in the way they used to make television back then. But I love it. There is a real charm to it. I think
there is a charm to it. Just to circle back in the direction of the Mythmakers, because we are we're drifting off topic. So. Another thing that occurred to me, obviously, I, as a, let's stick to the lie that I'm 21. I, as a sophisticated grown-up, can enjoy the Mythmakers because it's a very witty script. But if I'd been, an 8-year-old while this was happening, I would have had the most miserable 4 weeks waiting to get back to that Dalek story that we just saw the beginning of. And all this titting about in ancient Troy would have been absolutely exasperating and infuriating. What do we think about that?
I don't know. I think children then were certainly, they were just cut from a different cloth then. I think they would have, I think they would have enjoyed it anyway, because it's sort of, I don't know why I've just got this image of 60s school children just referring to their parents as mother and father all the time. So I just watched Mythmaker's Mother. It was super terribly exciting. I just see that right now, but I'm quite sure it wasn't like that at all.
I mean, I don't know if things changed that much from, obviously, we're all of a certain vintage. So I grew up in the sort of 70s and 80s, and we only really had 3 and then eventually 4 channels that we could watch. And if you were anything like me, I would sit and watch anything, just literally plant myself in front of the screen, and I'd watch anything just because, it was
there.
It was there, and it was on, and I would sit and be entertained by it. So I think expectations may have been a little bit different back then, whereas now there's so much choice.
Yeah. I think that was it, because I think, I don't know, I'm trying to think back to the 60s, were there any other sort of sci-fi shows on at the same time as Doctor Who? Obviously there were, and I think really that they sort of cut the BBC cut their eye teeth with sci-fi really on radio, didn't they? So I think this is the first sort of proper attempt at sci-fi, but I always felt the BBC seemed to be a bit embarrassed about sci-fi. Really, like it really was just for kids, really. And I suppose this kind of story, the Mythmakers, it was ticking that box that it had to be educational.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the BBC's remit, was to educate and entertain. So that's going back to Lord Reith, isn't it? So I think I think from that point of view, it does tick that box. But maybe in the way that it's done, sort of like Achilles isn't the master fighter in this. He wins because was it Hector? Is it Hector at the beginning?
Yeah.
He gets distracted by the Doctor walking out of the TARDIS, so Achilles stabs him, and then goes to kick him while he's down as well. So
there's no honour. There's no honour.
No, there's no honour at all. No honour at all. So I didn't mind the fact they sort of twisted. I could see what they were going for. This was how the myth came about, that Achilles, he won that battle, but this is because the Doctor distracted Hector, and he wasn't a great fighter either. There wasn't such thing as a Cyclops. It was just a guy with one eye closed. I like the idea that became the myth that we all know from the Iliad. So it may be just the way. Actually, I feel sorry for the Cyclops. Can we just talk about the Cyclops for a moment? What an ignominious way to leave the story.
Well, the actor's cropped up a couple of times before, hasn't he? So he was called Tuttor Lemkov.
Yes.
Probably absolutely mangled his name there. But unfortunately, he did seem to get typecast. So he's Cyclops in this. He was Ibrahim in The Crusade.
Yeah, he was in Marco Polo as well, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he plays a guy with an eye patch in that as well. So
God, blimey.
He's
Yeah,
obviously
talk
like
about
really good at
typecasting.
left eye acting, but his right eye acting is so bad that everyone says, let's just make him a one-eyed character.
Did anyone recognise Ivor Salter, who played Odysseus?
Yes, I did, yeah. Because I
From
know
a
he
previous
played,
Doctor Who
Oh,
story.
what was it? Is it Black Orchid? I remember him from. It wasn't he a policeman
He's in
that.
that, but he's also in one that we've seen already, which is the Space Museum. He was the lead Eddie Monster in that. I called them the
was
Eddie
he
Monsters because they've all got
really?
that sort of widow's peak. Yeah.
I totally didn't recognise him again. I obviously would have done if we'd had a televised episode to watch instead of a few photos. But
And of course, we got Francis de Wolf playing Agamemnon, who had previously appeared in one of our favourites, the old Keys of Marinus, as Vasor.
oh
Yeah,
yeah,
it was like-
Delightful chap.
Yeah, like he was like I'm going to put the wild man of the mountains, wasn't he?
Yeah.
In that, yeah, with the bearskins and everything. But,
Very dodgy, yeah.
Yeah, no, I know Ivor Salter. From my childhood, I remember him being in Crossroads. Actually,
Oh, okay.
yeah, he was in that for a while. But as I think quite a few Doctor Who alumni sort of cut their eye teeth on. Actually, I know sort of Philip Hinchcliffe wrote for
Terrence Dicks as well.
Terence Dicks did. I think
Yeah.
Wendy Padbury started out acting on Crossroads first as well. Mm-hmm. So yeah, there's quite a few people sort of that dipped their first toes into television through the medium
Yeah.
of Crossroads. Oh
Wow.
dear,
there's a book in that, surely.
there's got to be. There's
Yeah.
got to be. Oh dear, and Tony Adams as well. Not the footballer.
I was going to say, before his Arsenal
who
days,
played?
obviously,
He was in The Green Death. Funnily enough.
Okay.
He was in it for a couple of episodes, then just kind of disappeared, and seemed to be replaced
yeah,
by
that's right.
Roy Skelton instead. I think. So
Who's got his own connections with Doctor
Yeah, never
Who.
did figure out what happened to his character, but no. Crossroads fans will of course know that Tony Adams played Adam Chance in Crossroads.
Yeah.
There we are.
Wow.
Oh, you had the guy in The Dominators, and he was also in The Ambassadors of Death as well. He was in one of the main actors in
Yes.
Crossroads as well, wasn't he?
Ronald Allen. Yes.
That's that guy, yeah.
Yeah.
Good
what was the
memory,
character?
Phil.
David Hunter. That was. Oh God, I'm showing myself up now. David Hunter was the character he played. There you go.
Wow. Okay, if on Nerdology, if we ever do a Crossroads episode, you are coming on as a guest.
The only reason I know, because oh, sorry, we're going wildly off topic again, but my nan
right.
used to watch Crossroads religiously.
Nice.
I remember she got really excited once because Tony Adams, and I can't remember the actress's name now, but she played Noel Gordon's daughter. Basically, they were going to get married in the show or something, and they were on the front cover of the TV Times. And it was when my nan just go, "Oh, it's a lovely photo. Oh, isn't it a lovely photo of the pair of them like that? As if it was
Oh,
real."
a wedding for her.
Oh dear.
Oh,
Yeah, live your life through a soap opera. Dear.
Yeah. How sad. Living your
How
life through a
sad.
TV programme,
I know.
eh? Oh, dear.
Not like
Wouldn't
us,
catch us
eh?
doing that. And what did we think of Frances White's Cassandra? I think she gets a bit of a raw deal because they're very dismissive of her the whole way through. And all the way through, she's telling them, we are royally screwed here. These guys are going to come in and they're going to kill us. And they don't listen.
Yeah. No, she does get short shrift in this, doesn't she?
Yeah.
And then wildly overacts at the end. It's
Yeah, well,
yeah, I think
from what we can tell.
I was expecting her to sort of look slightly more, I don't know, terrifying or kind of arch. But I think she probably did a pretty good job, obviously. As with all of them, it's hard to know from the recon. But yeah, I think she did a really good job. Visually, it was kind of subtle, because she didn't have a sort of huge black beehive and cloak and loads of makeup. She wasn't clutching a skull or covered in snakes. She was just looking fairly legit, I would say.
Yeah.
And I didn't really notice the overacting at the end because I think I'd kind of mentally zoned out. I think once the TARDIS
Checked out.
leaves, you think you guys are all doomed. Move on. It's the Daleks next. It's the Daleks.
Yeah,
So-
bring it
Yeah.
on.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. No, I do think that not. I hate using the word pantomime when it comes to Doctor Who, because everyone levels that accusation at Who all the time. But I think there was. I think it's something to do with historicals. Really, yeah, we have to do that very sort of broad stage acting. Sort of wild gestures and big booming voices and. Yeah, it's sort of like that. This is how they spoke in olden times. It's all a bit like that. Yeah.
That reminds me, I was listening to the Sirens of Audio, which is a great podcast. They focus on Big Finish, and they had an interview with Peter Purvis, and he was recounting a story from the making of the Mythmakers. I think I've heard it before as well, where they were talking about how William Hartnell could be sometimes difficult to get on with, and it was kind of intimated that he didn't really get on with Francis de Wolfe. And apparently, I don't know if you remember the line, there's a line where Francis de Wolfe in the first episode says to him, "Sit down, have a ham bone."
Yeah.
And they're doing the take, and he says to William Hartnell, "Sit down, have a bone, ham." So, yeah, I don't think they got on particularly well.
Oh, dear. I do like that line, though. That's good.
That is,
yeah.
That's remarkable.
That's a very good comeback.
So, have we got anything else we'd like to say about the Mythmakers before we wrap it up and give it a score?
No. I think that for me, I think that's probably it, really. Apart from the fact that Troilus is a wet blanket, I think, actually, in a very long line of wet blankets that seem to steal away companions out of the TARDIS. I think that's what I can sum it up as, really.
That's what the ladies love, Phil, apparently.
Obviously, yeah. Not big rough seamen like Odysseus.
Right then, I think we should give this a score out of 10. So I am going to go first this time round, just for a change. I didn't actively hate it, but then I didn't find it the most exciting story we've seen so far. So it's kind of middling. So for that reason, I'm going to give it a 5 out of 10. Ooh. And next, I will come to Phil. Phil, what are you going to give this one?
Okay. It's not the most engaging of stories. It's as I say, very sort of as I said, sort of a lot of stage acting going, a lot of big booming voices. But I think everyone played that. This sort of played their parts reasonably well. Maybe some of them might have been miscast. I'm looking at you, Barry him, but I think on the whole, it wasn't too bad. But again, it is middling. I will agree. It is a fairly middling story. It's not one I would return to anytime soon, to be honest. So I think on that sort of basis, I would also mark it 5 out of 10 as well.
Okay, it's difficult, I suppose, because we're not able to see it in the way it was intended. So we're just having a go with what we got. Ian, what are we going to score this one?
Well, I'm finding it hard to kind of divorce the novelisation from the TV version, and it was one of the best novelisations. And obviously, we couldn't really give this a fair crack of the whip because it's a missing story, and maybe it didn't look quite as crap as it did in what Loose Cannon were able to scrape onto the screen. So I'm going to give it the benefit of the doubt and give it a 7.
Ooh. Nice. Okay, excellent. Well, that's what we think of the Mythmakers. Let's find out what you guys thought of this story.
I've got mail.
So let's start our feedback, and we're going to, as ever, go to our dear friend Ben in Indiana, who has left us some audio feedback.
According to the British historian Geoffrey of Monmouth, in his 12th century book, The History of the Kings of Britain, copyright 1136, according to this learned scholar, the very first human beings to set foot on British soil were in fact a group of Trojans, refugees from the war led by a Trojan guy named Brutus. After killing off all of the native giant monsters that they found in this strange new land, Brutus named the island after himself. Britain. Britain, sorry. So, a case can be made that when the very first Doctor Who came up with the idea of the Trojan horse, the Doctor actually set into motion a chain of events that would ultimately lead to the creation of Britain itself, which would, of course, ultimately lead to the creation of this very podcast we are now listening to. Mark and Ian, thank you, William Hartnell. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. And we've not had masses on this one. I suppose, to be fair, it's not the most accessible story. I'll set things off with, we've heard from Tim from the Missing Episodes podcast. As we record this, they have released their first part of their Daleks Master Plan coverage. So that's been a little while coming. So it's nice to see them back out and about again. So check that podcast out. It's a good one. And Tim from that show says, it's the best ever Doctor Who story. We proved it in tests. So yeah, this went down an absolute storm when they covered it, because obviously it's a missing one. I think they had Toby Haydock on to talk about it, and they were very, very complimentary about it. Probably more so than we were. So thanks for that, Tim. We have also heard from the World Enough and Time podcast on Twitter. They are at World Enough Pod, and they say best Hartnell hands down. So they are.
Wow.
They are. The consensus at the moment is very much at odds with our opinion.
It is, isn't it? It is.
We'll go over to Phil next. Phil, who have you heard from?
Okay, well, first of all, just a couple of items for feedback here. So first of all, we have feedback from Dwayne Bunny, and
Hi, Dwayne.
He says, I think this is the missing story I would most like to see returned. With laugh-out-loud comedy to rival the Romans, it's a needed respite in Series 3 before the dark epic that is the Daleks' master plan. Love it. So yeah, again, we'll continue with that trend of that goes complete against our grain. But
I mean, what do we know, eh?
What do we know? Exactly. Next up, I have some feedback from David Kitchen. And yet again, it's more positive feedback. He says, I'm a big fan of this story and would love to see it returned. It's witty and engaging, and another Hartnell story which tries to be properly epic on a TV budget. The model work of the horse looks like it was amazing. Perhaps the most underappreciated story the show has, because it's so good, but so very missing. And lastly, he finished up with, please don't bring up those long debunked stories about Hartnell in this story that circulated as fact for so long.
Well, now he's brought that up, we're going to have to discuss it, aren't we? So,
yeah.
Thanks, Dave. Oh, by the way, did you notice on the credits at the end, I nearly fell off my chair. It says sound, Dave Kitchen.
Yeah.
Kept that quiet, David.
I didn't
He looks
realise
a lot
he was
younger
that
than
old.
his years, doesn't he? Yeah.
Oh.
Whatever he's on, I want some of that.
So what are the
very good for his
stories
age.
about William Hartnell that he was referencing there?
I can only assume it was the
Aunt Bessie story.
well, yeah, I mean, I have heard tell from various corners people suggesting that William Hartnell was anti-Semitic. And there were some Jewish actors in this production, but I don't really know the ins and outs of it, to be honest. So, I'm not.
No, I have heard not about this story. I heard similar rumours from cast members themselves. Actually, So, but maybe that's saved for another time and another place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Phil. Right, Ian, who have you heard from?
We've heard from Andrew Wick at Andrazani Major on Twitter. I don't know which podcast he presents, if indeed he does. He says, The Mythmakers is one of the most genius stories of the entire series. I really wish they kept the pun titles and we had an episode called Is There a Doctor in the Horse? I can't think of any other Doctor Who story that's supposed to be a comedy that actually makes me laugh. He gives the story 100 out of 10.
Wowzers.
Wow.
Yeah.
Were they watching the same programme as we did? I'm beginning to doubt it, actually.
I'm getting a bit concerned now that I'm just not bright enough to really appreciate what's so good about this story. So,
Well, no, because I am very, very bright, and I didn't think
and incredibly
that much
modest
to it
as well.
myself. So bizarre. Maybe everyone
Okay.
is sort of viewing this through the rose-tinted glasses of, but it was a really good novelisation. Ergo, it must have been a really good story. I think that's probably the safest thing to assume.
I mean, that probably does colour people's opinion a bit. But, it's we are certainly out of step, it's fair to say.
Yes. Oh, well.
Yeah.
Well, everyone, if you're
for us,
listening,
it's a spice
I
life.
gave it a 7, so I'm with you. I'm on your side.
It's
These
our
two
fault, Phil.
losers, forget it.
Oh, fair enough.
Philistines.
Fair enough. Guilty as charged.
Football fans, what are you going to do?
Hey. All right, Mr. F1. Phil, thank you so much for coming on and being our guest. It was a real pleasure having you on.
Oh, thank you for having me. That was a lot of fun. That really was a lot of fun. So
Yeah, well, I'm sorry we put you through that, but
Yeah.
if it wasn't too much of an ordeal, maybe you'll come back and we'll be a bit kinder to you with a choice of story next time.
Oh, I'd love to. That'd be brilliant. Thank you.
That would be excellent.
Would you like to give your wares a quick plug before you disappear?
Yes, of course. So you can find Who's He Podcast just by Googling. You can follow us on Apple Podcasts. You can also follow us on Google Music, Amazon Music, Spotify, all the usual places. And of course, you can find us on Twitter just by Who's _ He _ Podcast. And we've also got a Facebook group as well. So please come and find us and download and subscribe and listen. Thank you very much.
And you also moonlight on other podcasts, I understand.
I do indeed, and do also moonlight as one of the hosts on the Doctor Who podcast. I should say the resurrected Doctor Who podcast, resurrected as of last year, which I will take credit for its resurrection.
Single-handedly restored it.
Single-handedly restored it. Yeah. So no, that's you can find us in all the usual places, on Apple Podcasts and Google Music and
Just
so on.
type in Doctor Who podcast. I mean, there's not that many, is there?
No, not at all. There's only. I've actually lost count of how many there are now. Actually,
that's brilliant. Thank you so much, Phil. So until next time, join us when the nightmare begins. If you'd like to get in touch, you can email us at mailbagofrassilon@gmail.com. We're also on Twitter @TimeAndSpacePod. And you can also find us on Facebook. If you want to leave some audio feedback, there is a link in the show notes. You can use your phone or your computer and leave up to 60 seconds of feedback. Or if you're listening via the Anchor website, you can click on the message button and leave your audio. We'd love to hear from you. And thank you to Momo Tempo for providing our theme music.